How did we all miss out on Dinner in America?
If you survived on a diet of ugali and sweet potatoes for 3 years, you'd understand why I'm so ecstatic about your mom's cordon bleu.
What's ugali?
Don't worry about it.
I'm not talking about sitting down with your family for good old American Thanksgiving dinner. I'm talking about the fantastic indie love story that gives us an insight into the perspective of a mean, angry, and vulgar
Still stories, Bill.
punk rock kid who hates the world, and his only mission in life is to burn everything around him to the ground. This movie has something important to say about the anger people can hold, and about how letting go of that anger takes real courage and is the only way to move forward with your life. I found this myself a few years ago when I was angry at the world, when I hated everything. Letting go of that hate, of that anger, is one of the most important things I ever did, and that's what I'm going to explore today while I review Dinner in America. But first, I want to get into my favorite things and my least favorite things about this movie. First, the music. Music is an essential part of the premise of this movie. The whole plot line is based around it, so the music is an essential piece of the plot. They use really bass-heavy EDM music to set the mood. It's a vibe that really goes with the main character, Simon's character, really amplifies his anger, and is used really well throughout the movie.
Fuck!
It also feels like it's used really well during some of the comedic moments to add a little bit of rhythm to them. I like this better than using any of the music that his band produced from Psyop. I think the music choice was really well done. Second, the movie sets up Simon as this evil, devilish character. He gives off vibes like Loki. His only real mission in life is to burn things to the ground. He likes to throw live grenades into family dinners, just to ruin anything around him that feels normal.
Allow him to grow in grace and knowledge of you, and guide him in his search for his birth parents, who must one day hope to see his face, just as he longs to see theirs.
Wait, what?
He curses, steals, sells drugs, and is overtly sexual with basically every woman he encounters. He's everything he sets out to be. Suburban America's worst nightmare. Third, the social commentary. Dinner in America does its best to provide a new take on what you might consider kind of an old trope of social commentary. Criticizing the American family and the rigid boundaries we put ourselves in isn't exactly something you'd consider to be revolutionary. This movie is aware of that. I think this is the reason it appears to be set in the mid-90s. Though there is some question as to whether it's set in the mid-90s, but I'll talk more about that later. These old traditions, along with their old critics, have a home in the late 90s and early 2000s media, especially in the punk rock scene. I found myself worried in the first 15 minutes that this was just going to be a masturbatory social commentary of 25-year-old critiques of society, but this movie found a way to be more than that. It used its social commentary and its look at the rigid background of certain aspects of American family life as a punchline to a joke rather than as the whole premise for the movie itself. The movie's broader statement here is that love can make way for better things, and letting go of that hate, that anger that can drive you, it's the only way to get through the bad and make way for something better. I think this is a more complete and compelling statement to make. Anybody can criticize the bad about society, but it takes real courage to let go of the anger, especially if that's what's driving you. And it takes real courage to tell people that letting go of their anger, letting go of the driving force in their life, can make room for something better. And if you're looking for something better, make sure to hit the subscribe button and leave me a comment letting me know what movie I should do next. 4. More than anything, this movie stuck by its guns when it comes to comedy. It made me laugh harder than any movie I've seen in quite a long time, maybe other than Deadpool. It takes Simon's angry perspective on the world and turns it into a joke. Everything Simon says feels completely ridiculous.
You order some of the dinner menu.
Jesus fucking Christ, Lou, just get the coffee! Lady, you mind your own fucking business, and you and me, we're gonna get along fine.
I think this is because of how distorted Simon's worldview has become. This is largely due to his anger. It makes you only see the bad in things. It makes you amplify the awkward moments, and it makes sitting through them feel horrendous and awful, which makes it easy to see why Simon is so angry. And it also makes for some excruciatingly funny, awkward moments.
God, that coffee tastes like shit.
It's Sanka.
5. The use of perspective in this movie, I think, is a really important part of the story. The whole movie seems to be told through Simon's perspective. It's this perspective that makes everything seem so awkward and weird. Sometimes it seems like this movie is being incredibly honest with its awkwardness, but sometimes it feels like things are a little bit distorted. I think what we see is the worst of everything. Dinner in America takes place through the lens of somebody that hates the world. The teenagers on the bus stand out as a pretty good example of this. Patty seems to not really understand what's going on with them, and I think their overzealous and horrible nature is Simon's perspective on what they look like. It's not until Simon points out how disgusting their behavior is that Patty even notices it, or certainly realizes that she can do something about it. It isn't until Simon stands in her defense, it isn't until some of Simon's anger rubs off on her that the world stops kicking her around and she stops taking it. It's this rougher, more jaded perspective that we're watching the movie through that makes Patty stand up for herself. It relieves her of her naivete and her innocence, and this naivety and innocence softens Simon up. It allows him to live in the world. It allows him to cope with living in the world.
Sorry, Dad's allergic.
To cigarette smoke and alcohol.
Yeah?
Jesus fucking Christ, how does he cope?
I think a similar thing can be said about the awkwardness at the dinner tables. All the worst parts of people come out at the dinner scenes in this movie. Everything that makes Simon uncomfortable, every problem he has in the world, is amplified in these quiet, trite, and irritating family dinners that he's sitting through. I don't think anybody else in the world sees them that way. I think to everyone else in the world, other than the viewer and other than Simon, sits through a perfectly normal family dinner, unaware that anything is off. The reason these things seem ludicrous is because we see them from Simon's perspective, the perspective of somebody who hates the world. And finally, number 6. More than anything, Dinner in America is a love story, and kind of a classic one at that. It manages to suck the audience in with this vulgarity, violence, and humor, and it gets you invested in this somewhat strange relationship between an awkward, slow girl and this angry, vulgar, and even sometimes terrifying punk rock kid who has a tenuous grasp on his own sanity and is very narrowly escaping the police. Dinner in America is disgustingly cute. The process of Simon slowly softening up is quite heartwarming. This starts with him just sharing weed with Kevin. He stops Kevin from becoming a little version of him who's angry at the world, who only sees the bad. It's this simple act of kindness that helps Simon reach out and helps Kevin feel a little bit better. But I think the best moment at this story is at the PSYOPs concert, when the world stops and Simon dedicates his song to Patty and the world melts away around them. I cannot stress enough how important this part of the movie is. A feeling like that, it's indescribable. It's the whole point of this movie. This movie rushes you into this love story just so you can catch a glimpse of the feeling you have when the world melts away around you when you look into the eyes of somebody that you love. It's a feeling that we only catch glimpses of on film. It's a feeling that we only catch glimpses of in our own memory. It's the best thing that human beings have, and it's the most important part of Dinner in America. I searched long and hard for something to hate about Dinner in America, but even in my cynical heart, there isn't much for me to pick on. So for my dislikes, I only have 2, and I'll start with the painful awkwardness. Some of the scenes in this movie are so cringe-inducing, I just absolutely cannot stand it. Now, I understand that the awkwardness in this movie is definitely a part of its charm. Some of the scenes in this movie are so unsettling to watch, I couldn't have this in any other category. So as far as the awkward scenes go, when something makes your stomach turn this much, I guess it has to be a dislike. And secondly, what the hell year does Dinner in America take place? I think the writer may have been trying to push a sub-theme with the ambiguity on this point, but it's not well done enough for me to say that for sure, or to say that at all, really. For the most part, it appears to be in the late 90s, but there's a comment at one point where Simon says,
That's a good boy. You don't want to play to a sea of cell phones, do ya?
The sea of cell phones comment feels distinctly 2020. You could make the argument that Simon is living in the past, that his anger has held him back, but this point isn't really made elsewhere. It's also maybe just a mistake. Maybe the sea of cell phones comment went unnoticed. Maybe it's not trying to push some deeper meaning about how holding on to anger can hold you back, and how Simon's living in 1990s and maybe everybody else is living in 2020. I can't say that for sure. It's a pretty loose this theory about why that quote might be in there, and I honestly think it's more likely it was just a mistake. Those are really the only dislikes that I have about this movie. So, why does Dinner in America speak to me? And why has it become something of a phenomenon 4 years after its release? I don't know what it takes to write the perfect love story, and I certainly don't know what it takes to reach back in time and grab a piece of culture and pull that into a script. But I think Dinner in America gives us some good insight into what that might take. When I was a teenager, I was angry. I hated the world. I cursed God, my parents, society. Anything I could think of to blame for the pain that I felt, I did, and none of it worked. And I think this movie spells that out well. Early on, Simon is a hateful drug dealer whose only mission in life is to burn shit. Throughout the movie, he consistently finds himself sitting down to a family dinner where everything goes to shit. In the first dinner he has that's kind of going well, he throws a live grenade into the table when he tells Kevin he's adopted. And through this whole thing, he was lying about who he was. It takes something powerful to pull you out of that angry state. We as human beings are so easily pulled in and driven by anger and resentment when things aren't going well. It's funny and somewhat sappy stories like this that can remind us that being angry and hateful only serves to further destroy us. In the end, as cliched and gross as it sounds, love is what pulls us out of this. Love is what heals us. It moves us forward in life. In the words of Ted Mosby, love is the best thing we do. And this is what Dinner in America gets right. It's a funny, touching story that's a surprisingly quick 105 minutes, perfectly describes what love can do for you. So let's give Dinner in America a failure score. First, the plot. The plot in this movie is really well done. It's well paced, it goes so fast, it uses a dark sense of humor and continual run-ins with the police, along with the main character who's borderline manic throughout the whole movie, to keep the plot moving at a lightning pace throughout the whole film. It gets an 8 out of 10. The cinematography, while being simple, does add a lot of depth to the story. They use a lot of stable camera shots to almost make you feel trapped in these awkward moments. You feel trapped within Simon's perspective on the world.
Are you fucking kidding me?
You also get the occasional extreme wide shot to make you feel really isolated at points. It does a good job to tell a dynamic story with some pretty basic camera work. It also gets an 8 out of 10. The characters in Dinner in America develop a lot. There's a great opposites dynamic between Simon and Patty where they get to make up for some of each other's faults and make each other better in different ways. Kevin, a side character, also finds himself developing quite a bit, having Simon rub off on him a little. The movie manages to remind you not to take life too seriously, and Kevin chills himself out by becoming this cool stoner boy, and you also get a really deep emotional connection with all of the characters. And all of this is done in an hour and 45 minutes. It's faster in a Marvel movie and has more complex characters than a Marvel movie. It gets a 9 out of 10. Thematically, this movie is also very solid. It tells its story naturally throughout the plot, and it doesn't add unnecessary filler to fill out the theme in the movie, and it doesn't take unnecessary sharp turns to explain the theme to you. Because it's a comedy, the theme is a little less fleshed out than it might be in some more dramatic movies, but it's still great. It gets a 7 out of 10. And the writing in Dinner in America is fantastic. The only nitpick I have for it at all is the sea of cell phones comment. Other than that, it's very quippy dialogue. It feels ridiculous while also managing to feel natural to the characters. I think it's the strongest point about this movie, and it also gets a 9 out of 10. All totaled up, Dinner in America gets an 8 out of 10 overall. It's a really great movie that deserves a lot more love than it got over the last 4 years. It was kind of quietly released during COVID in 2020 when people kind of weren't paying attention, and it only has recently gotten popularity, and Red Letter Media did a video about it, but there's not a whole lot on YouTube about it. If you haven't seen it, seriously give it a watch. It's worth your time. It'll make you laugh. And if you go watch it, let me know what you think about it in the comments. Anyway, thank you for watching. Make sure you hit like and subscribe on this video, and check out my most recent video on American Psycho.
I'm a watermelon slammed into your driveway. Crack me open so I feel the